On July 4th, 2019, I'm going to remove my license plate from my personal vehicle and I'm going to boycott the DMV. Inevitably, I'll be pulled over. When I am pulled over, I will live stream my interaction with the officer to the Facebook page, Not in Compliance. Hi, I'm Steven, with a V, and I'm trying to organize a protest against the government. They are grossly failing our children. They are absolutely misrepresenting our values on the global stage, and they are completely mismanaging our money. There are two major hurdles for protest, though. One, they're wildly ineffective, and two, many protests turn violent. So why do protests seem to be ineffective? From what I see, it's because the people only ask for what they want. Some protests don't even get started because the organizer was denied a permit. What kind of mirror world do we live in where we feel the need to ask permission before we protest the government? You can rest assured that nowhere in this video am I going to suggest that we ask the government for permission of any sort. So what do the successful protests have in common? Well, it seems that the people band together and use their collective force to put some pressure on the system. So why do some protests turn violent? Well, sometimes that collective pressure turns into violence. How do I prevent that from happening at my protest? It seems that the larger the turnout, the higher the likelihood of violence. Sometimes it's the protesters that are angry, sometimes it's the counter-protesters that are angry. Sometimes the violence comes from within the crowd, sometimes from without the crowd. Sometimes the police just show up in militarized riot gear and decide some tear gas, pepper spray, and a beating is what the crowd of protesters need. The common denominator in all of this is there's a crowd of people. One way to avoid violence is to avoid large crowds of protesters. We need our voices heard and we need our collective force felt, but we need to not be in the same place at the same time. So to avoid violence, I'm going to start the first decentralized protest. Our power is in our numbers and our behaviors. Violence never solves problems. It only establishes a hierarchy between the parties involved. The government has a monopoly on legal violence, and we are all aware of the hierarchy of the relationship between us and the government. If you are not in compliance with the law, the state will bring legal violence against you. If you don't do what the tax man says, you'll be eligible to be taken to the for-profit prison complex. That sounds like a tyrannical government to me. The government tells us that if we don't like the way things are being ran, we need to get out and vote. I don't think voting makes a bit of difference. It doesn't seem that any political ideology has anything close to what they want. I've seen multiple elections where the vote went one way, but the results went the other. We have zero power in the ballot box. It's like giving your kid brother a video game controller that isn't connected, so he's fooled into thinking he's playing the game like a big boy. Perhaps the most appalling thing about how the government has failed us is how they are setting our children up for failure. The public school system is an absolute train wreck. If the school system was focused on grooming self-sufficient adults, then there would be curriculum from elementary all the way through high school on how to prepare food, how to manage your personal finance, and how to teach yourself things. Everyone I've ever suggested this to has agreed. Has the federal government simply not realized the importance of money management? Well, maybe they haven't. I don't know. They have put you and me $22 trillion in debt. Even with the obvious failures and shortcomings of the public education system, the government won't allow you to teach your kids in a way not approved by the government. Between your direct community and the connectivity of the internet, you could find all the resources you would need to teach your kids better than the public school system ever has. The government has also failed to authentically represent us and our values, both here at home in the way that they represent the other party to the other party, and globally. Our military is killing civilians all over the world. Innocent people who are just like you and I are dying. The government is using your face and my face to sell war. Much of the world associates the American flag with violence and tyranny. When the survivors of these wars are done mourning their loved ones and come seeking retribution, what can we say we did to try and stop the American war machine? If traditional protest won't work and voting won't work, what will work? Jury nullification. Jury nullification is a sanctioned doctrine of trial proceedings wherein members of a jury disregard either the evidence presented or the instructions of the judge in order to reach a verdict based upon their own conscience. It espouses the concept that jurors should be the judges of both law and fact. That means the jury doesn't have to rule with the letter of the law. The jury's verdict is final, and the jury can never be found liable for their rulings. In a courtroom, the judge and the attorneys are all well-versed in the law. The jury is not well-versed in the law. The judge and the attorneys will try to convince the jury, who they often refer to as 12 rocks in a box, because they think we're all stupid. They will attempt to convince the jury that they are to rule with the law. The reason that the group of people who know the least about the law but have the most power in a court of law is because they are supposed to be the moral guidance of the police and the legislators. The framers of the justice system knew that the law could become weaponized and used to enslave the people. The 13th Amendment says that if you've been convicted of a crime, then you can be a slave. They gave us the power of jury nullification to combat that. The legislators can write any law they like, but if juries won't convict, the law don't mean squat. That means if the government is regulating a behavior that you don't think they should be regulating, if you were to receive a citation or a fine for this behavior, you could take it to a trial by jury, and a jury could nullify the law in your case. They need to know their rights and what their job actually is, though, in order for this to start happening. The jury box is where our collective and decentralized power lies. Let me explain how we flex our collective muscles and show the government that we are done asking permission. On July 4, 2019, I'm going to remove my license plate from my personal vehicle and I'm going to boycott the DMV. Inevitably, I'll be pulled over. When I am pulled over, I will live stream my interaction with the officer to the Facebook page, Not in Compliance. All that should happen is I should receive a ticket. If the situation got worse than a ticket, I hope it wouldn't go beyond my car being impounded. I certainly don't want to catch a beating from an officer. Let me just say this, I am committed to never taking the first swing against anyone, let alone an officer. And I believe that a physical altercation between myself and an officer will never work out in a beneficial situation for me. Anyway, no matter how it goes, I'll end up with a ticket, a fine, and a court date. When I go to traffic court, I will exercise my right to a speedy trial by jury. We have the right to have any criminal action tried before a jury, and we have the right to a speedy trial. When my trial date arrives, I will refuse a public defender so that I can speak to the jury on my own behalf. During my opening statements, I'll explain my protest in an attempt to get the jury to exercise their right to nullification. If they were to nullify the case, I would never have to put a license plate on that car again. Once you've been tried for a crime, you can't be tried again. We call that the Alex Trebek, more commonly known as the double jeopardy laws. Now, if I'm the only one doing this, I don't like my chances of success. But if many of us removed our license plates and committed to taking all of our traffic citations to a trial by jury, and we commit to serving every jury summons we get, which would be plenty, we would flood the justice system and back them up for a few years, at least. They'd have to take every juror they could get, and that means that many of us with a nullification agenda would make it through. They try to weed out people who seem to be aware of their rights during the jury selection process. If the jury doesn't enforce the law, the government loses power. After we've nullified enough cases, then they would drop similar cases to those that have been nullified at a high percentage rate. and that particular behavior would no longer be monitored by the police. This is how we regulate the police. This is how we regulate the elected officials. This is how we regulate how much tax we pay. This is how we get our communities to reflect our values. Now listen, if this protest gains traction, and if you were to use this protest to victimize someone, maybe you think that because you don't have plates on your car, you could get away with it. You wouldn't be caught. Just be forewarned that when you do get caught, your jury pool will be full of very justice-minded jurors that are tired of seeing good people being victimized. Also, if you drive for a ride-sharing app, for the safety of the customers, I personally ask that you leave your plates on your car while you're driving for the app. Please go to the Facebook page, Not in Compliance, to show your support. Share the video, share the page, tell your friends, your family, your coworkers. Are you going to take your license plates off on July 4th, 2019? I am. Help me start the first decentralized protest and the first wave of the next American Revolution. I hope to see you in the jury box.